Hey everyone, and welcome again to the Stoner Report. It's me, Mario Stoner, Associate Editor of Cannabis Culture Magazine, and I'm here with this week's news wrap-up. I hope everybody out there had a good week. I did. I'm very busy these days. But today on the Stoner Report, Oklahomans are ready for marijuana law reform. A majority favor marijuana legalization in California, another poll finds. Most applicants for Massachusetts medical marijuana dispensaries approved in the first round review. The U.S. Senate hearing takes on mandatory minimums. New Mexico doctor appeals suspension over medical marijuana. Ottawa awards its first licenses. Medical marijuana plant could be coming to Smith Falls, Ontario. Kentucky hemp farmers chance prosecution. And something that Jeremiah put up yesterday, Mississauga protesters plan march in support of jailed marijuana activist Mark Emery. So, a couple of polls starting off today. First one being in Oklahoma. Oklahoma Normal Friday released survey results from a Sooner poll showing strong support for medical marijuana and majority support for marijuana decriminalization. The poll had support for medical marijuana at 71% and support for decriminalization at 57%. The poll did not ask about legalization. The poll of registered voters was conducted between August 28th and September 9th. The margin of error is plus or minus 4.9%. If someone is going to be arrested for a marijuana offense, nearly two-thirds respondents said they should be treated instead of jailed. Under current Oklahoma law, possession of any amount can earn up to 1 year in jail. Sorry, I'm getting music. Under current Oklahoma law, possession of any amount can earn up to 1 year in jail for a first offense, from 2 to 8 years for a second offense. Marijuana sales of any amount can earn a sentence of up to life in prison. The state's largest cities were the most in favor of fixing the state's laws. In Metro Oklahoma City and Tulsa, support for medical marijuana was higher than 75%, and support for decriminalization was 67% in Tulsa and 63% in Oklahoma. Well, that's good news, and it just shows that more and more people are learning about marijuana. They're being educated about it. This one did not poll legalization, but medical marijuana is definitely effective. And pretty soon it's going to be legal everywhere. It's just a matter of time now. And similar news in California, where, however, this one is for legalization of recreational purposes, because California already has a medical marijuana program in place. Support for marijuana legalization is above 50% among Californians, and even higher among likely voters, according to a new Public Policy Institute of California poll released Thursday. Oops, what was that? I lost my page. There we are. While other pollsters have reported majority support for legalization in the past, especially in the run-up to failed 2010 Proposition 19 effort, Thursday's poll marks the first time PPIC has recorded majority support for legalization. PPIC polling in September 2011 had support for legalization at 46%, and that figure dropped to 45% in March 2012. Now the numbers have flipped. The poll found support for marijuana legalization at 52% among respondents and 60% among likely voters. Conversely, 45% of all respondents and 38% of likely voters opposed legalization, with undecideds accounting for only 2 to 3% of respondents. And it goes on to explain the Democrats and independents and how different segments of the population voted. But it's good that the numbers have flipped finally, probably due to Washington and Colorado. In Massachusetts, a recently legalized medical marijuana program, the state public health department announced that 158 applications were eligible to continue in the competitive process. The initial round of applicants were reviewed for nonprofit status, financial viability, and compliance with other application requirements. These are applications to run a dispensary in Massachusetts. This is a very competitive process, and we required applicants to meet high standards in advance, State Public Health Commissioner Cheryl Bartlett said in a statement. We are fortunate that Massachusetts had a very large field of serious applicants who are capable of making a significant investment to benefit qualified patients and safeguard communities. Bartlett said, while no decision to deny an applicant was taken lightly, we wanted to ensure that those who advance could demonstrate the ability to operate a successful nonprofit registered marijuana dispensary. 22 applicants did not meet the criteria to proceed in the process, and only one applicant withdrew, the state said. Applications were denied for a wide variety of reasons, state officials said, including failing to incorporate as a nonprofit or a lack of demonstrated financial viability. Okay, well that's good news, but interesting that in order to give medical marijuana or be a dispensary, you have to be nonprofit. I don't understand that reasoning exactly. Doctors certainly aren't forced to be nonprofit. In fact, they profit a lot from other people's suffering and misery. So it's obviously a good step, but it's definitely not treated as the way it should yet. More good news, as the U.S. Senate takes on mandatory minimums, the Senate Judiciary Committee held a hearing on mandatory minimum sentencing last Wednesday, as Chairman Senator Patrick Leahy and a fellow committee member, Senator Rand Paul, sought to create momentum for a reform bill they filed together this spring, the Justice Safety Valve Act, Senate Bill 619. The hearing comes in the face of federal prison population that has increased sevenfold over the last 30 years, driven in large part by mandatory minimum sentences. The number of which has doubled in the last 20 years. Many of them are aimed at drug offenders, who make up almost half of all federal prisoners. Taxpayers are shelling out more than $6.4 billion this fiscal year to pay for all those prisoners. Mandatory minimum sentencing reform has already won support from the Obama administration, with Attorney General Eric Holder last month issuing guidance to federal prosecutors instructing them not to pursue charges with mandatory minimums in certain drug cases, and announcing last week that the shift would also include people who have already been charged, but not convicted or sentenced. And it has support on the federal bench. The same day as the hearing last week, Judge Robert Holmes Bell, chairman of the Criminal Law Committee of the U.S. Judicial Conference, sent a letter to the committee expressing the federal judiciary's position that mandatory minimums led to unjust results and strong supports for the Justice Safety Valve Act. The letter noted that federal judiciary had a long-standing policy of opposing mandatory minimums. So there you are, mandatory minimums tie judges' hands, essentially. forcing them under certain crimes to give out long sentences, even though they're for nonviolent drug crimes, and they're usually not deserved. And since, for the most part, well, anyways, sorry. I'll just go into the next story. Some bad news this week, as a New Mexico doctor who has been suspended over medical marijuana appeals his sentence. In the 6 years since New Mexico legalized medical marijuana, Dr. Nicholas Nardassi has cleared more than 1,000 patients to use it, a tenth of all the patients certified across the state in that period, for conditions ranging from cancer to multiple sclerosis to post-traumatic stress disorder. He even uses it himself to treat chronic back pain. But now the New Mexico Medical Board has suspended Nardassi's license, claiming, among other violations, that he certified patients without proper documentation and that he examined and treated patients while under the influence of marijuana himself. Nardassi is the first practitioner to be sanctioned by the board on allegations misusing the state's 2007 medical cannabis law in a case that could represent one of the first tests of the law's limits. Another practitioner who received a notice of contemplated action entered into a settlement agreement with the board. Nardassi, who is appealing the board's decision, claims the case against him is not supported by the board's own investigation and is rife with conflicts of interest. He also asserts the campaign against him is really an effort by the board to show that New Mexico has a tight oversight over its medical cannabis program, so the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency won't seek to enforce federal drug laws against patients in New Mexico. While using cannabis is allowed for certified patients in the state, it is still a controlled substance under federal law. Well, good luck to Dr. Nardassi. Not knowing the details of the case, I can't really say anything, whether he was right or wrong. I think, considering how cannabis is pretty much a harmless substance in any event, any crimes that he is accused of, except maybe like performing his duties while under the influence, is not really a crime at all, except in the perceptions of some idiots who still control our laws. Meanwhile, in Canada, we have new medical marijuana regulations coming into effect April 1st. And basically that entails that anybody who sells medical marijuana must be a corporation and sell it, I think, through the mail, because they're not allowed to have storefronts. And so the company that used to deal out the medical marijuana in Canada before, a company named Prairie Plant Systems Incorporated, is one of the first to get the licenses. A Saskatoon company has been granted the first two licenses, to produce and distribute medical marijuana under the new Health Canada pot rules. Prairie Plant Systems Inc. and its subsidiary, CandyMed Limited, are to sell 3 brands of pharmaceutical-grade marijuana for people with chronic and terminal illnesses. Each brand has a different strength of THC, the active ingredient in pot. The company, which has been Health Canada's only supplier for 13 years, says the medical marijuana can be used to treat pain, nausea, and stimulate appetite. Well, first of all, THC is only one of the active ingredients of pot, so the story from the Huffington Post is wrong. Let me just go in there and see whether it's an Associated Press or something. Otherwise, we can write Huffington Post and let them know. Now, this is the Canadian Press, so it's not them. Huffington Post just reran it like we did. So that's one thing, there's CBDs and CBAs and other cannabinoids. It's not just THC. So, and those are more effective for other things than THC. You probably all heard of Marinol, which is just THC that's allowed in the States, but it tends to make people nervous and is not nearly as good as the entire plant put together. And the Prairie Plant System's quality of their cannabis has been known to be absolutely dismal. They grow in a radioactive mine, a decommissioned radioactive mine. Heavy metals abound. It's underground, and when they do provide people with cannabis, the cigarettes have been reportedly full of stalks and seeds and stems and completely unsmokable. So these idiots, these incompetent morons, have the hands up from the Harper government, or the thumbs up from the Harper government, and it just goes, to show stupid and stupider, and that's all I can say about that for now. Another company could be opening a medical marijuana plant in Smith Falls, Ontario, which used to be a Hershey plant. Canadian company is awaiting approval to bring medical marijuana production to Smith Falls, Ontario. Smith Falls Mayor Dennis Staples said he found out Wednesday the former Hershey's plant, which has been vacant since 2008, is in the process of being sold from Icon International to Tweed Incorporated. The company that bills itself as being established to supply growing demand for high-quality prescription marijuana has to get Health Canada's approval to start producing medical marijuana. Staples said the plant would be welcomed because it would bring 20 full-time jobs if and when it launches, eventually growing to over 100 full-time positions. It's going to happen somewhere in Canada. Our community of Smith Falls, population 9,000, have lost 1,700 jobs in the last 5 or 6 years, he said. Our doors are open to try to attract new investment and more fundamentally, recreate and reestablish some of the jobs that have been lost here. So I don't know much about Tweed Incorporated. We'll have to see what their deal is over time, and hopefully they'll get their Hershey's plant. I mean, I'm not in favor of the new medical marijuana regulations in Canada because it cuts out home growers, and they're definitely not going to last. There's going to be so many people challenging this law. Not only that, it's the home growers that know what they're doing, so everybody's going to want their cannabis anyway. But right now we have a really shitty government in Canada, and we're stuck backpedaling because of them, it seems. Back in the U.S., in Kentucky, some brave hemp farmers have gone ahead despite the fact that the federals could prosecute them. Farmers who plant industrial hemp in Kentucky soil risk prosecution regardless of a U.S. Department of Justice memo on federal marijuana enforcement issued earlier this year, Kentucky Attorney General Jack Conway said Wednesday. Regardless, the Kentucky Industrial Hemp Commission will continue its effort to launch a hemp licensing program, said Holly Harris, Chief of Staff for Kentucky Agriculture Commissioner James Comer. In an advisory opinion to Kentucky State Police Commissioner Rodney Brewer, Conway said hemp remains an illegal substance by federal law. Although the General Assembly passed Senate Bill 50 to set up a regulatory framework for industrial hemp farming, Conway said state law identifies hemp as cannabis plant with a federally established concentration of tetrahydrocannabinol, the psychoactive ingredient in hemp's botanical cousin marijuana. The problem, Conway said, is the federal government has not set such a tetrahydrocannabinol level and still bans hemp in the Controlled Substances Act. We do not have either a change in the Controlled Substances Act to exempt industrial hemp, nor do we have a federal waiver from the Drug Enforcement Administration, Conway told reporters on a conference call. Comer criticized Conway's opinion, saying the Attorney General is wrong to threaten to prosecute farmers. Yeah, it sounds like this Attorney General is saying that we're going to prosecute, or I'm going to prosecute you anyway, despite what the Attorney General said, or the U.S. Attorney General said, and we know about that from previous stories that some Attorney Generals are just crazy. I think there's one in California, Melinda Haig, I believe is her name. So this is just her Kentucky cousin. And it looks like it's 3:20, so happy 420 to everybody in Alberta and that part of the United States. And I'm just going to puff down on my beautiful Cheech bong here. So haven't normally been a bong person over life, and Jeremiah's bongs are usually too big for me, so I end up coughing and choking. But this one seems to be just right for me. It's a nice color, it reminds me of a lightsaber. I call it the Force. So I'm pretty lucky and happy to have this bong. Let me look up the chat and see how you guys are doing while I take this brief break. Oh, looks like people are in chat. Hey, everybody in chat. Hey, Dr. Clone, Yo-Yo. What's happening? Oh, yeah, I almost forgot this week to mention Sensible BC again. I think we're in the second or third week, and we're gaining momentum. So if you live in British Columbia and you care about decriminalizing cannabis, you should definitely sign a petition if you have time to be a canvasser and get signatures. Please contact Sensible BC at sensiblebc.ca. All the contact numbers are there. We have a lot of great people working on it. It's really good to see that the province is becoming a bit revitalized politically. We have bad provincial premier, the Liberal government is pretty shitty, and a lot of people didn't vote. A lot of people were apathetic. So I'm really hopeful that the Sensible BC campaign will not only decriminalize cannabis in British Columbia, but get a lot of people more interested in the government, and hopefully we won't have such a crappy Liberal leader like Christy Clark. Yeah, you suck, Christy. Next time. I wonder if she's still on vacation. That was some good weed I was smoking. It's the name of the strain, and it's very fragrant. Tastes awesome. All right, let's get back to the news. Oh, thank you. Oh, somebody just tossed me a bud. Look at this. Isn't that sweet? So I don't have time to smoke it on the show, but I'll have some afterwards. It's going to be a lot of fun. Okay, what do we got left? All right, and so we got one last story, and this is about Mark Emery, would be my boss if he was allowed to own this company still, but he was my boss in the past, and right now he's in jail, as you all know, and the Canadian Safety Minister is supposed to rule whether or not he's allowed to serve the rest of his sentence in Canada. We don't know whether we want to do that, because if he does get transferred, he will get more sanctions than he would if he stayed. Yeah, despite that, the Canadian minister should allow the transfer so that Mark can decide what he wants to do. There's absolutely no reason, once the U.S. has approved it, which they have. Because of this, people who love Mark arranging protests. I think this is the second one I've heard of. I think there was one in Vancouver as well. This could be the same one, I'm not sure. The Mississauga South NDP Riding Association is organizing a march in Port Credit on September 29th in support of jailed marijuana activist Mark Emery. Emery, founder of the BC Marijuana Party, was arrested in 2005 for selling cannabis seeds via mail, an act illegal in the United States, by the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency and Vancouver Police. He was extradited in 2010 and has been serving his 5-year sentence in American prisons. On July 10th, the U.S. approved Emery's prison request to finish his sentence in Canada, but the Canadian government has not yet approved the application. This march will proceed at 4 p.m. from Port Credit Memorial Park to the office of Mississauga South Tory MP Stella Ambler, where activists will request that Emery be brought home as soon as possible. Now, for those of you who don't know, Tory means conservative, which is the government in power right now, the Harper Conservative government. So this is a good place to send the protest to. And good for you out there in Mississauga. Thanks a lot for helping Mark out. We appreciate it and love it. And, honestly, we had nothing to do with it here. It's just people care about Mark and appreciate what he did and what he's doing. And that's great. Thank you very much. All right, so that ends another edition of the Stoner Report. Thank you very much for watching. Remember to get out and sign the Sensible BC petition if you live in British Columbia. Remember that pot is the most advanced life form on the planet. It seems to have a lot of the answers to helping us survive this next cataclysmic age that we're running into. So don't lose hope. Take care, and we'll see you next week.